Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Abang Iskandar Abang Muas, the president of Suara Petroleum Group, to deliver his speech. Mr. Abang Iskandar Abang Muas graduated with a master's in business administration from Ball State University in Indiana, United States of America in 1988. Prior to that, he obtained his bachelor's science in business administration from Indiana Institute of Technology and diploma in accountancy from UITM. He has over 33 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, of which 15 years were with the Shell Group in Malaysia, upstream, and Saudi Arabia petrochemical. He also held leadership roles in a number of Malaysian oil and gas companies, having operation in Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia, Iran, Syria, and Ethiopia, where he was involved in both upstream and downstream projects. He is also experienced in establishing a number of ventures between Malaysia and foreign companies in the oil and gas industry, and currently involved in the cyber security business and volunteering his time to a number of Sarawak NGOs.
Thank you, Alicia, yeah. Thank you. I'm Abang Iskandar. So what we will now do is share, to begin with, a short session about the history of oil and gas in Sarawak. This will take about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll go to the crux of the discussion today, on the challenges facing Sarawak oil and gas industry on the sustainable development goals. So before that, our thanks to our friend Professor Awang Azman. Good to jumpa dia lagi. We have a few sessions together in other opportunities, and it's always a pleasure to have Professor Awang. Also to Cik Khairul, it's the first time that we met, but it was always positive in getting this thing done. So semangat Sarawak ya nyanang ada lah ya. So that's what we want. And also special mention to the president of PMSUM, Cik Lokman. When we started talking about making this happen, Syeda kata orang dua tiga, sorry I cakap Sarawak sikit. No second thoughts. He said, let's do it. So semangat of our young people like that. Kita tu, as Cik Khairul said, bukan orang lama lah ya. It really it's a good feeling to see orang muda, having the enthusiasm, semangat ya. So thank you to PMSUM. And looking at how this thing is organized, cantik, cantik. So we are very appreciative of that. So for all you young minds out there, hopefully bukakan minda. Let's listen to a few old men lah ya, experienced oil and gas professional to share with you this is our contribution back to you, and hopefully that can make significant milestones in either your decision in the future or just your view of how things work. Okay, so allow me to maybe 10 minutes to just share with you, kata orang si tahu si sayang, a few slides on the history of oil and gas in Sarawak. You all can see the view graph kan? Boleh So, Sayang Sarawak. Just to introduce ourselves, Suara Petroleum Group, as was mentioned by the pengerusi majlis tadi, we are organized by a few professionals, business owners, and service providers with relevant experience in oil and gas. So our membership is very limited. So we don't just ambil sebarang. We have to also make sure that we have integrity and also credibility in our society. Our mission senang aja. We want to give advice and also to help Sarawak, and also Cik Khairul mentioned a little bit just now, one of the things that we are really concerned about is the safeguarding of the rights, our rights in oil and gas industry, not only for us, maybe kita orang dah past the prime, but it's also for you guys, the future generation. Yeah. So our objective, sustainable advancement. So today we talk about sustainability. We also want to promote the rights and interests of Sarawak and also engage in areas of common interest. Now, why is this important, you ask? Well, here are a few facts and figures. Out there, the luar pantai sana, Sarawak have 34 oil fields that are currently producing, 26 gas fields that is currently producing, and we produce, this is an average number, 850,000 barrels of oil equivalent. Barrels of oil equivalent meaning it can either be gas, it can either be oil. This is a conversion punya number. So remember this number because as we talk about sustainability later on, what does 850,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day means to Sarawak, to oil companies, to the world? Is it setitit aja kah or is it banyak? Okay. If you calculate that against an average of oil and gas price, Sarawak punya revenue from its 850,000 barrels per day is roughly about 200 million per day. So make a rough calculation, 200 million a day times 365, you should get about what, 73 billion ringgit. Yeah. So this is, I'm just giving you a apa kata tadi, eagle view, view from the top. Okay. Now, don't forget also, out there in Luar Pantai Sarawak, we have about 200 discovered oil and gas fields, and it is not yet developed. Okay, so imagine the potential there. And for Malaysia, 37% of the reserve of oil is in Sarawak. For gas, 57% of Malaysian gas reserve is in Sarawak. If you calculate that as barrels, we have, outside our pantai and a little bit onshore, about 10 billion barrels of oil equivalent of reserve. So masih dalam tanah nun, under the ground, 10 billion barrels of oil equivalent. Later on, we'll talk and we'll show some numbers. How big is that? Okay, so this is why we say, as Sarawakian, don't forget that is these important numbers that we have to start thinking about. Just a brief who we are. I'm the president. Cik Amim is the deputy president. He's also around. So my other committee members are also around, and they are also joining this webinar. Highlights. What have we done? Well, we were launched in 2016. Yeah. And then in 2017, under the late Tok Nan, there was a Sarawak Oil and Gas Council. So we were a member of the Sarawak Oil and Gas Council. Unfortunately, that council has it has changed into something else. So in 2019, remember Sarawak has about 100 years of experience of oil and gas history. For the first time in 2019. Sarawak had its first oil and gas and exhibition seminar in Miri. So we were the organizers in 2019. Yeah. It was long due. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we can't do the second one, but we were hoping to do it this year. Inshallah, next year, maybe we'll do it. In 2020, also we had the first public forum in Kuching, where we had the title, Fight for Our Rights, Fight It Right. Yeah. So this is, for example, one of the first public and Cik Khairul mentioned about when OMO was hot at that time. Yeah. So this is one of the public forums that we presented what OMO was all about. In 2020, we had the opportunity to present to the Honorable Chief Minister of our views of how the new chapter for Sarawak Oil and Gas. And later in October last year, just before the lockdown, we had an open forum session, technical session in Miri, prospectivity of onshore Sarawak, oil and gas resources. We did that in conjunction with Curtin University. So this is just the highlights of the things that we have done. So let me get into the crux of things. The history of oil and gas in Sarawak. How did we get there or get here? Okay, ceritanya panjang. It started in the 11th century, ya, kurun ke-11. There was already a report in China that when they sailed to Miri, there were hills that were on fire because of the oil was seeping out of the rocks in Canada Hill. Now it's called. Yeah? So if you go from the laut, you can see Miri on fire. So as early as 11th century, there was already written by the Chinese that there were oil seeps, minyak tanah in Miri. In 1882, yeah, the resident, Mr. Host, under Charles Brooke, reported that in Miri, waktu tu, there are already 11 wells digali dengan tangan, hand dug oil wells in Miri. So 1882. 1907, Mr. Host yang resident tadi, he retired. He was already in London, and Charles Brooke gave him the permission for him to talk to Shell. Shell at that time pun baru start, nothing, nothing. Syarikat Shell at that time was just trading in Sumatra. So Sarawak started to talk to them, and in 1909 signed the first oil mining lease. This is 1909. So Sarawak dengan Shell or whatever Shell was at that time, Anglo-Dutch company, they signed a 70 years lease from 1909 and 1984. So sekiranya lah, there was no Malaysia, that lease would still run until 1984. Yes? So Sarawak had already its own oil mining lease. And again, this number you should remember, the concession agreement at that time was Shell will pay Sarawak 12.5% royalty. Yeah? So kita boleh argue kah 5% kah 10% kah 20%. But historically, Shell has already signed with Sarawak a 12.5% royalty. And at that time, the profit sharing was Sarawak gets 40% of the profit. Now kita boleh argue lah, what does it mean? Who kepada siapa 40% tu? At that time, Sarawak was under the kingdom of Brooke lah kan, Raja Brooke. So most likely 40% tu goes to Brooke lah. Yeah. So that was 1910. We come to 1910, where if you sekarang pergi kat Miri, you see on Canada Hill, there is the grand old lady. That is the Miri oil field. So it was discovered in 1910, and Shell, pandai orang Shell ni, so they created a Sarawak oil field company. Yeah. So it was developed by Sarawak oil field, and 1913 they already started to export the crude oil dari Miri itu to luar negara. So Sarawak started the export in 1913. So ini all still zaman Brooke, and in 1914, now you see how clever they are. They already start to say, hey, kita export crude sahaja, it's less value. Why not we operate a refinery so we can add value to our resources? So they start to export petroleum product. So that is in 1914. So if you see the picture on the top left there, one is the Grand Old Lady. The second picture is the refinery during zaman Jepun. So that's why you can see ada soldiers kat situ. So that is 1914. Now remember, if you look at it globally, USA found their oil in 1860. Rockefeller dan sebagainya. 1863, Russia pula discovered oil. Next to that, in 1910, Mexico and Malaysia, they found oil kat situ. Iran, is only in 1913. Saudi Arabia, 1938, baru ada jumpa minyak. Norway, 1969. Now, Norway is a very good example. Nanti we talk about sovereign fund and how they manage the oil and gas well. But they only found oil in 1969. So kita should be proud that kita dulu lah. So we were one of the pioneers of oil and gas. And in fact, kalau tak ada Sarawak, I think Syarikat Shell wouldn't be where it is now lah, because Sarawak was their main producer at that time. So what happened after what I call this the war years? In 1914, in 1918, World War I. Remember the concession agreement signed dengan British dulu? Included in that concession agreement was Sarawak will supply the British Navy certain amount of minyak. So we, like it or not, we also helped the British to fight during the World War I. And don't forget, one of the ally of British during World War I was Japan. So Sarawak was also supplying the Japanese Navy minyak in 1914. Yeah, then you remember, you can think why Japan was interested in landing in Lutong first in 1945. So by 1940, Miri or Sarawak at that time already produced about 7 million barrels of oil. So it was a lot during those years. Yeah, and during the war, 1941, 1945, before the British left, what they did was this assembly, for the Lutong refinery, they hantar to Singapore. The Japanese came down and said, mana itu refinery? So they took it from Singapore, they reassembled it in Lutong. Yeah? So remember just now why the Japanese knows about this? Look at the history. The Japanese was interested in Sarawak, in Lutong, because of the oil. They were also interested in Indonesia, Banjarmasin, because there was also oil at that time over there. Yeah. 1955, now we are no more Brooke, we are into the British colonial time. This is where Shell, so in 1955, we started offshore exploration. And then in 1957, there was no more new lease for onshore. And now we are starting, Petros is starting the onshore lagi. 1962, now remember this year, 1962, the major discovery of Patricia and Tamana, it is still producing today, major oil gas fields outside of offshore of Sarawak, 1962. And in 1972, after 61 years, the onshore operations were closed. Okay, so if you see my view graph, semua naik. So activity menuju puncak lah at that time. Now my next slide shows this is Malaysia from the year 1910 to 1980. Maybe tak nampak, but what it says here is the number of discoveries. These are detail lah, field the nama apa dekat mana and all these things. But if you see the bottom right, the number of discoveries. Sarawak between 1910 to 1980, there were 34 discoveries, oil and gas, and their first operation of oil and gas was in 1910. So 1910 kita dah start mula produce oil and gas. Sabah during those period hanya 8 discovery and their first production was 1971. Peninsular Malaysia, this is important, 22 discoveries during those period up to 1980, but their first production was only 1969. Why am I sharing you this one? My next slide starts with 1963. Bila Malaysia was formed, only Sarawak had producing oil fields yang produced, because kat Semenanjung and Sabah it was only discoveries, tak ada production. Now that's to me quite important, and maybe this one Cik Khairul will be very interested. There was a review in 1964, somebody by the name of Walter Levy. The review in 1964, what happened to that review was it created the Continental Shelf Act 1966 and also the Petroleum Mining Act 1966, PMA. This is sebelum PSC. In 1967, it created the Petroleum Income Tax 1967, so sebelah at federal level. Now, why is that important? In this one banyak orang tahu lah, the emergency period, 1969, where the PMA was extended to Sabah and Sarawak. So in a way, until recently, when we knew about our OMO, we didn't know that we already had our own ordinance, or not that we didn't know, it's not into public knowledge. So 1974, the PDA, Petroleum Development Act 1974 was enacted. Then it created Petronas, and Petronas become the regulator, owner of all oil and gas resources in Malaysia. Now, to me, or to us who are in the oil and gas industry, 1974 is crossroad. Yeah, things looks differently. So just now, my previous view graph all naik atas, this one going down. But for Malaysia, tak apa. In 1976 to 1980, oil become a strategic resource for Malaysia. It plays a very important role in the development of Malaysia. 1978, Carigali was formed, Petronas Carigali was formed. Only then Sabah and Peninsular Malaysia start to produce oil. So 1963 to 1978, PDA 74. Siapa ada minyak at that time? Producing minyak, only Sarawak. Only 1978, baru the production in Sabah and Peninsular Malaysia starts. In 1984, this is another important thing that Sarawak needs to know. Peninsular Malaysia gas, yang dijumpa dekat Terengganu, was deemed to be used for industrial use in Peninsular Malaysia, and Kerteh Refinery was commissioned. Why I think and share that PM gas for PGU is important, because in 1984 it was decided at the same time all our gas kat Sarawak ni is only to be used for export. So, tak ada pakai sendiri, sikit aja for people who are in Miri, adalah you can enjoy the domestic gas. Yang lain kat Kuching tak ada. So where is our gas? It's all exported to Japan and Korea, for them to burn. And again, when we talk about sustainable development later on, whose gas are they burning? It's actually our gas. Anyway, and in 2004, after 70 years, Lutong Refinery was decommissioned. Most of my friends here from SPG, we were in Miri and oblivious to the fact that we gave up the refinery. So it's something that we want to make, not to make amends, but to share with you what happened. So imagine from 1970 to 1990, the oil-based revenue at the federal level rose by 19%. So sumbangan oil and gas kepada pembangunan Malaysia daripada 1970 to 1990 naik by 19%. But for Sarawak, dia menurun. So remember in the Brooke and colonial time, oil and gas played a significant contribution to the revenue of Sarawak. So later on, hilang, pandai jadi kecil. Something to think about, And as later on, Mark Chella will share that for Malaysia, right now, oil and gas revenue for federal is about 30% of Malaysia punya revenue base. So the future, this is important for you guys. Ada orang kata tak ada minyak lagi. Well, this is a view graph to show that no, don't worry. For Sarawak oil and Sarawak gas, the forecast is it'll still be there. And don't forget, the 50% of national oil and gas of gas is still in Sarawak. 37% of oil revenue is in Sarawak, the reserve. So SPG like to challenge if somebody says, saya ada lagi oil and gas sibuk tak susah, sudah habis, sudah tutup. Well, think about that. 57% of the national gas reserve is still out there, unexplored, unproduced, and 37% of its oil reserve is also out there. Okay, and this is latest 2021 Malaysia bid round. Malaysia bid round is where Petronas pergi kat luar negara, pergi to foreign investors and say, come, pergi invest kat Sarawak. Pergi invest kat Malaysia, including Sarawak. So this is the view graph that they have of Sarawak. Now it will show you, this is a bigger number, 41 billion barrels of oil equivalent is still in place in the Sarawak Basin. Sarawak Basin is yang ni macam color offshore Sarawak. 41 billion barrels. Banyak tu. However, if we risk is where people like Mark and Abang Hatta, all the experts in oil and gas look at it and say, 41 tak boleh lah, banyak challenges. We believe yang boleh di-recover is 11 billion barrels. Tadi I said 10 billion. This is the latest from Petronas. Dekat Sarawak, there is still 11 billion barrels of oil equivalent yet to be produced. Yeah. On the right side, there is this view graph of showing the success rate in Sarawak. Not bad for people in the oil and gas industry. 42% success rate in the 5 years. So, come on, Sarawak is still, to kata orang, maybe people like us are already dah past the prime. But if you see the Sarawak opportunities, it is still enormous. And in this view graph, there's a word lang lebah. Yeah? Last year, PTTEP, Petroleum Thailand, EP, they found this lang lebah gas field, and it is known to be in last year's punya one of the top finding of discoveries in the world. So banyak lagi. So just to share with you, this is a map of all the infrastructure out there. Yang hijau is gas, yang merah-merah small kat situ is oil. So there's still a lot of there, but numbers that you need to remember: 34 oil field, 34 gas field, 26 oil field, producing 850,000 barrels per day of approximately 200 million per day. Yeah? There is over 200 discovered field undeveloped. Yeah? And these are the numbers that we have. So it's still out there. And this is another picture. You see how big the infrastructure is out there. There is over 300 platform, over 350 kilometers of pipeline. Unfortunately, most of it are 30 to 40 years old. So when you talk about transition into new energy, so what are you going to do with these old fields? Is it just to say, oh tak apalah, tinggalkan aja, tutup aja, kita buat benda lain? Is that the smart way to think? So this is our challenge to you guys, young people, to see, hey, maybe there's a new way to look at this. Okay, so macam highway yang di luar non, all the gas fields that we have. Okay, enough said. You can look at our website, look at the things that we have written. Some of it controversy, tak apa, because we are, as Cik Karul was saying, we are the people who are in the business. We look at it from the business of oil and gas, and today we are glad to share with you our views from the industry. So maybe it is very direct, very crude, very to the point, but that is how the oil industry looks like. We have 7 strategies that we have told the highest level in Sarawak and say, look, these are the things that you need to do. Number 1, Sarawak, nothing else. You need to reaffirm your rights to the oil and gas. You need to have a formula that between all the stakeholders, a win-win formula to move forward. We must have our own oil and gas master plan. And we talk about Norway just now, our wealth fund, we must have that. We must have a very strong Sarawak Minerals Management Authority. And this is and Cik Karul mentioned about OMO. This is the organization that should look and monitor, regulate, enforce OMO. We should have a Sarawak Petroleum Consultative Council, not just from the government, but also have representative from the industry. And number 6, we must have local content baseline and policy. How the contracts are given out by Petronas and by other oil and gas. Ensure that our local and people like you who have who wants to get into the oil and gas industry are given the opportunities to do that. And number 7, something that we are working with Ketin, and maybe we can work with you guys also. We must have our own Sarawak Oil and Gas Innovation Center. Tak boleh cerita lama lagi. So this is hopefully by this session, when we talk about the SDG, you guys can see both sides of the story and say, there must be a new way that Sarawak must move forward. Okay, so that is hopefully our challenge to you today. So you can contact us, look at our website. Yeah, so basically, thank you. SPG is here to do a win-win framework. We want to facilitate the development of our own oil and gas resources. So we think you guys, the students, you are going to be the backbone of that new oil and gas resources. Kita orang ni will retire, or some of us has retired dah. Yeah, but you guys should be carrying the banner. But if you carry the banner, make sure that you are maximizing the social economic benefits as per what is rightfully Sarawak.